Magandang umaga po ulit sa ating lahat. Ang tagapagsalita ang pinaka-aktibong public historian sa telebisyon sa bansa. Nagtuturo ng kasaysayan sa De La Salle University at Broadcast Communication sa University of the Philippines, Diliman. Nagtapos ng Bachelor of Arts at Master of Arts sa kasaysayan at kandidato o magtatapos ng Doctor of Philosophy sa Antropolohiya sa University of the Philippines, Diliman. Kasama rin siya sa nagsulat ng aklat na Bonifacio, ang unang pangulo at ng bayaning biographies, Andres Bonifacio. Naglathala na rin sa iba't ibang artikulo sa mga journal na akademiko. Siya ang Public Relations Officer at Board Member ng Philippine Historical Association. Lumikha ng Xiao Time television segment na pinapanood ngayon ng mga estudyante at guro sa buong Pilipinas. Nagsusulat din siya ng column sa The Manila Times tuwing Martes at sa Pinoy Periodiko. Noong 2022 ay pinangalanan naman siya ng Esquire bilang isa sa 100 most powerful Filipinos. Narito na po si Professor Michael Charleston B. Xiao Chua.
I'm Xiao Chua. I'm a public historian here in the Philippines.
Makasaysayang araw po sa inyo lahat. Good morning everyone. Tiong Se Academy. I'm so happy to speak here in the very first school, Chinese school in the Philippines, imagine. And I was told that you can better understand me in English. Is that right? Yes. Yeah, so we will speak in English. Because, you know, later on you will see my nose will bleed already. Yes. Okay, anyway, that's it. Let's begin because I only have what? 40 minutes? Is that right? What if I exceed? You'll kill me. So I have to finish at 9 o'clock in the morning. Sige. I will try. Okay? But this is a simple talk. I don't want to complicate it too much. Basically, what we're talking about is what is the United Nations and why is it important? Now, you know how many member states, what are the dates. You'll just look it up. I do not memorize these things. I just want to tell you a story of why it is important. And we're a very small country, supposedly. Although, if you're going to look at it, we're not really very small. Our maps are actually wrong. Yes, do you know that our maps are wrong? Because our world is a globe, right? It's a oblate spheroid. So when you put it in a flat thing, there would be a difference. So in the map that we see, will seem so small. But actually, we're a medium-sized country. I think we're even bigger than England. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. We'll check that, okay? But we're a medium-sized country. We're a medium. If we were going to look at it, no, you can find it in YouTube about these maps that we use are actually not as accurate. Because the accurate thing that you can have is a globe. Okay, now, I told you that because there's something about maps that I'm going to tell you about in our story of the Philippines and the United Nations. But first, let's go back about 200 years ago. Around 200 years ago in Europe. Remember that in Europe, every now and then, there are always wars. Because they still believe in the idea of conquest. No? That when you have a stronger army, you just get land for yourself. Okay? And there were kingdoms that are ruled by kings. And the kings, a lot of them have absolute powers. Of course, there were constitutional kings. You remember, they have limited powers. Like in Britain. But a lot of European countries have absolute monarchies. I'm talking about the 1700s and 1800s. So, what's my point here? My point here is, there was no concept of human rights. Because there's no concept of equality. Because the rule of the law of the land is yung parang law of the jungle. Yung ano, the ano yun, the fittest, the survival of the fittest. So if you have more power, you are the one who's nasusunod, right? Nasusunod. Okay. So, I mean, ironically, Napoleon actually, you know Napoleon Bonaparte, right? He was so hated by a lot of Europeans because he actually conquered these countries. But he actually conquered them to give them democracy. To give them more freedom, actually. Because they were under kings. And after that, there was what we call the rise of the nation states. So eventually, a lot of the European countries took down their absolute monarchies, or at least if they had them, they were more democratic. But they were still going to wars. Every now and then, like probably every 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, they go to war. And the worst thing about it was, in 1914, when World War I erupted, that was not actually for a good cause. You know, in World War II, it was very clear. Hitler is evil. He was killing people. He was annihilating peoples. We have to fight them. Japan was terrible. We have to fight them. Italy was terrible. We have to fight them. That was very clear in World War II. But in World War I, they were fighting because they were allies with each other. I mean, they were fighting because when one country decided to go to war to another, they already forged alliances. And those alliances were actually because of Queen Victoria and Albert. You know Queen Victoria of England? She married Albert, Prince of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Queen Victoria is the longest reigning monarch until my favorite queen, Elizabeth II, who just died recently. Slay. But what was the plan of Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha? Because Queen Victoria was queen, so Albert's goal was to impregnate her with many sons and daughters, so they can marry off with all the royal families of Europe. So they became allied with these countries. And that kind of thing, he wanted to expand the influence of Britain. And the royal house, not of Windsor at that time, but of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which was actually a German house, ruling in England. It was a German house. So, that means if they're now allied, when one of their countries go to war, everyone has to go to war with the other countries. So there was a time when the British and the French, they do not actually know why they were fighting each other. It's just because they have alliances. So that war was a terrible war, and they called it the war to end all wars. The war to end all wars, because it was a great war, the Great War. We did not call it World War I at the time. It was called the Great War. It was the greatest war we ever had. And because of that, the United States pushed for the establishment of the League of Nations in Paris, yung Treaty of Versailles. And of course, the humiliated countries, the German countries, and the other countries like the Ottoman Empire and Russia, they were placed under They were placed under the influence of some of them. Some of the losers were placed under the influence of the winners. And those who actually lost, like Germany, were like given so much restrictions. And they divided the land actually during World War I. So that was the big problem at the time, was that the winners, they decided on what to do with those countries. Which of course in all wars that is what happens, no? But the League of Nations, even the League of Nations was not approved by, the membership of the United States was not approved by the US Congress. So they were not a member of the League of Nations. Even if it was the president of the US. Who's that guy? President, the one who had a stroke. Wilson. Si President Wilson, actually, what do you call this? He was, he had a stroke after that. So he wasn't, it was his wife was running the government according to some people. But, yeah, he was a good man, he wanted peace. But the US did not join the the League of Nations. And eventually, this League of Nations supposed to prevent any war from happening again. But lo and behold, 1919, in 1935, there was another war. So you're just counting less than 20 years, 15 years, there was already another war. 15 years. Because in 1935, Japan invaded Manchukuo. That is in northern China. Diba? The Manchus were the last rulers of China, right? The emperor. Last emperor is a Manchu. Ay Xinliu Puyi, who became a puppet governor of puppet emperor of the Manchurian Empire under Japan. Okay. Now, the Germans, of course, eventually will conquer a lot of Europe. By 1939, they will annex Austria. It's what you call the Anschluss. If you watch The Sound of Music, that is the story. So, are you still with me? Yeah? Very good. I like them. They're very intelligent. Even in grade 5, I don't underestimate students. They understand these things. Okay. So, I will not complicate it. World War II happened. So many people died. And yeah, and of course, you all know the fact that the Germans gassed and killed 6 million Jews. There was totally no human rights to talk about. The Japanese here in the Philippines, as you well know, what they did to us, the atrocities of, catching, putting babies up in the air and catching them with bayonets. All of these things happened. There was no human rights. So in a state of war, our talk today is very much, how do you say this? Is very much relevant because at this moment, there are atrocities that are happening in Gaza and in Palestine. Whatever side you are, actually, don't pick up sides anymore because you're Filipinos, number one. And number two, you know what side you should be with? The side of both the civilians of Israel and Palestine. Because both of them are suffering. Under these terrible things that are being drawn by what we call the extremists. Both in Israel, the extreme Zionists, who wanted Israel only for the Jews, and the extreme Palestinians who want the extermination of the state of Israel. Okay? Already both of them are, for me, and this is just of course a discussion here in the classroom, is already wrong. And the ones that are victimized by this are the civilians. Just earlier, before I went here, I heard the news that a hospital in Gaza was bombed. It was a Baptist-run hospital. So civilians died there, probably 500 people. So, it was a terrible thing. So, now, after that war, that was in 1945, the victor countries, there was, at first, the big four. China, they put China as one of them. It's the Soviet Union, which was used to be Russia, which is what Russia used to be. And then you have the United States, and then you have Great Britain. And then they included around 50 countries more to form, on October 24, they signed the charter, they signed the charter or the constitution of what would constitute as the United Nations. Okay, now, one of the achievements of the United Nations was headed by the former First Lady of the United States. Because during the war, the president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then he died before the war ended. The First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt, chaired the panel to draft something that would constitute a universal understanding of how to treat human beings. You get me? Because there is actually, because you know how to treat human beings is cultural. You have different treatment for women in China, for example, in the 1800s, during the time of the Manchus. Different treatment to women. In the Philippines, during the time of the Spaniards, you all know that women are not educated. Oh? There were people that are excluded. Like Filipinos were not part of citizens under Spain. No? There was a time during the American period that not all Filipinos have the right to vote. Not all Filipinos of the proper age have the right to vote. Only the men who are educated and who know Spanish and English have the right to vote. And so human rights was not universal. And the goal was to draw up a list of rights that would become our basis of how to treat each other. Wherever you are in the world, whoever you are in the world. And we are going to celebrate on December 10, if I'm not mistaken, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, which was headed by Eleanor Roosevelt. So I'm going to let you watch a 10-minute video to give you the importance of this event. Before I answer the final question, how did the Philippines join the United Nations? Okay?
All right. All right.
Did you like that? It's a very beautiful video, isn't it? Oh. Now, so it's well, I will answer two more questions before I end, and we will get questions from you. But let me also reiterate what happened, what was said in the final part of the video, that the United Nations actually do not have police powers to implement the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all the other treaties, like the Geneva Convention on how to treat human beings during war situations and all of that. If you're going to look at the United Nations, they're telling Israel, stop bombing Gaza. This is a humanitarian catastrophe, and the Israelis are still bombing. Actually, by the way, I have to clarify this, that the Israeli government is denying that they bombed the hospital in Gaza. That it was one of the Palestinian bombs that, went short and went to their own people, no? But we still do not know. So we have to be careful about that situation. So the United Nations is telling them, and they're having difficulties talking to the Israelis. But I will tell you later why it is important to still have the United Nations. But again, it was said there that, as it was said, it's just a piece of paper. If we're not going to leave it. So when you try not to, when there is a great desire to bully someone, your classmate, and you do not do it, and you treat other people well, you are living the Declaration of Human Rights. Because again, if you expect people to treat you well, you have to treat other people well as well. Emilio Jacinto, the great Katipunan young leader, he was 18 when he joined the Katipunan, he said this: ang di mo ibig gawin sa asawa, anak at kapatid mo, ay huwag mong gagawin sa asawa, anak, kapatid ng iba. This is fantastic. Okay, now, that said, so again, even the 1987 Constitution doesn't mean anything if you are not abiding with the Bill of Rights. Right? Okay, let's go to the second to the last question. How did the Philippines join the United Nations? Okay, remember that in 1945, October 24, 1945, we were still not an independent country. Our independence will be returned by the Americans on July 4, 1946. And that's a few months short of the UN Charter. But were we a member, original member? Actually, yes. We are an original, even if we're not yet an independent country. Remember that war happened and there were two existing governments in the Philippines during the war. The Japanese occupation government, which eventually was granted independence by the Japanese, supposedly, which is what we call the Second Philippine Republic under President Jose P. Laurel. But supposedly the legal government of Manuel Luis Quezon went to the United States, and that is what we call the Commonwealth Government in Exile. Manuel Luis Quezon, he left the Philippines with Douglas MacArthur. And Douglas MacArthur had an aide-de-camp. He was a journalist. Aide-de-camp meaning he was the Julalay of, Julalay, okay? Aide-de-camp. The Julalay was a famous writer in the Philippines. And he was also part of the broadcast during the war, during the Battle of Bataan. He was a young man. And he became famous because he was a small guy. Small guy. He went around the United States to talk about the Philippines and the experiences of our war and how we were the last one to surrender to the Japanese in Southeast Asia. So he became a very famous person. And he became the diplomat, our representative, to that conference in San Francisco, where the United Nations Charter was signed. Okay? That person, a Filipino, he grew up, I'm not sure if he was poor, but he was not very rich. He was born a few kilometers away from where I was born. I was born in Tarlac City, and Tarlac City was the center. Tarlac was the center of our province, or of our provincia. That guy was born a few kilometers away. So he was born in the province. But he became one of the educated because he was intelligent and he was sent by the Americans to a school in the United States. And eventually became a prominent man in the Philippines. Okay. This guy's name is Carlos P. Romulo. Okay, Carlos P. Romulo. I don't know if there's Romulo Highway here. Wala. Sa Tarlac may Romulo Highway but it's actually named after his father. Hindi kay Carlos. But Carlos Romulo is very important in our history. He served 8 presidents. From Manuel Quezon to Ferdinand Marcos. In many different capacities. As Secretary of Foreign Affairs, as UP President, etc., etc. So, but he was, for many years, our representative to the United Nations. And I tell you his story through this video. Okay? Video.
Si Carlos P. Romulo ay maraming bagay para sa Pilipinas. Isang manunulat, mamamahayag, diplomatiko, bayani. Ito ay sa kabila ng kanyang pagiging little. Ang karagdagang detalye tungkol kay Romulo mula kay Xiao Chua sa Xiao Time, Ako ay Pilipino. Makasaysayang araw po, it's Xiao Time! Sa Miyerkules, January 16, 2013, pipiliin na ang Miss Tarlac City 2013 para sa pagdiriwang ng pista ng aming bayan sa January 20. Tutungo po ako doon upang maging isa sa mga hurado. Suportahan po natin ang piyesta, paanyaya ni Dong Bautista at Cloydy Manluta. Sa isa pang bayan sa lalawigan ng Tarlac, sa Kamiling, isinilang naman 115 years ago ngayong araw, January 14, 1898, ang isang little giant, si General Carlos P. Romulo. Si General Romulo ang maliit na mama na kasama ni General Douglas MacArthur sa makasaysayang larawan na ito ng kanilang pagbabalik sa Leyte noong 1944. Parang bulinggit lang, ngunit hindi man umabot sa tangkad na 5'4", siya ay isa sa pinakadakilang Pilipinong lingkod bayan na lumakad sa mukha ng daigdig. Nagsilbi siya sa 8 Pangulo ng Pilipinas mula kay Manuel Quezon hanggang kay Ferdinand Marcos. Imagine, liban sa Little Giant, maraming pang ibang ikinabit na titulo kay Romulo. Parang beauty queen o boksingero. Si Romulo ay isa sa mga pensyonado na nag-aral sa Estados Unidos. Nakilala sa galing niyang sumulat at manulumpati. Naging mamamahayag, propesor ng UP at tagapayo ni Quezon. Nagwagi ng Pulitzer Prize, ang unang hindi Amerikano na nanalo ng journalistic award na ito. Naging voice of freedom ng radyo mula sa Corregidor at nang hirangin ni Quezon na kalihim ng impormasyon, 2 taon niyang inikot ang Estados Unidos upang magsalita sa ngalan ng mga sundalong Pilipino-Amerikano sa Pilipinas. Remember freedom. Nakilala siya bilang Mr. Philippines. Sa sobrang kasikatan niya, naging kinatawan siya ng Pilipinas sa paggawa ng charter ng United Nations o UN at kasama sa mga unang lumagda sa pagtatatag nito kahit na hindi pa tayo independent nation noon. Noong 1949, nahalal si Romulo na Pangulo ng ika-4 na General Assembly ng UN. Kailangan liwanagin na isang sangay lamang ang General Assembly ng UN at hindi siya naging pinuno ng UN o Secretary General tulad ng napagkakamalian ng iba. Mataas na posisyon pa rin ang Pangulo ng General Assembly. Nakaupo siya sa 3 phone books. Makita ng madla sa kanyang unang talumpati bilang Pangulo. Tinawag siyang Mr. United Nations. Bago magretiro sa diplomatic service, naging embahador pa sa Washington, D.C. at kalihim ng ugnayan panlabas. Ngunit noong 1962, hindi pa rin pinayagan ni Pangulong Diosdado Macapagal na makapagretiro. Nahirang na Pangulo ng Universidad ng Pilipinas noong 1962. Matapos pa nito ay nahirang pa sa ilang pang pwesto sa gabinete. At sa kabila ng kanyang edad, ang balong si Romulo ay nakapangasawa pa muli ng isang magandang Amerikanang mamamahayag, si Beth Day Romulo. Tinawag tuloy siyang Karate Kid. Sumakabilang buhay siya noong December 15, 1985 sa edad na 87 at hinimlay sa libingan ng mga bayani sa Fort Bonifacio. Bakit ba ang galing niya? Minsan kanyang sinabi, I had to be outstanding to prove I was capable, not in spite of having been born a Filipino, but because I was a Filipino. Mr. Philippines, Mr. United Nations, Karate Kid, salamat sa pagsasabing, ako ay Pilipino, marangal. Ako po si Xiao Chua para sa telebisyon ng bayan. And that, Xiao time.
Okay. Yes. Video na lang ulit. Teka. So, mapakita yung case, yung juice nakalagay. Juice. Juice, orange juice. Wait, ano lang? Yan, mamaya. Okay. So, mamaya. Okay. So, again, so how did the Philippines join? Because there was Carlos P. Romulo, who actually was one of the drafters of the United Nations Charter, and he was one of the signers of the first chapter of the United Nations. So, what was our role in the United Nations? No, in fact, akala natin we have a very small role, pero actually malaki pala. But before I tell you about our role in the United Nations for many times, I would like to first give a pretext about the refugee crisis. In a time of conflict, merong mga refugees, which means that there were people fleeing from conflict to be safe. And of course, when you talk about that, when you want to receive them, there will be problems. Because you have to feed them, you have to give them resources, etc., etc. Now, of course, the United Nations help in doing that now. There will be help from the UN. And you know, the United Nations, I think there are countries who fund it, but in total, it actually live on donations of people, especially humanitarian. You can actually enroll in a system wherein you give your part of your salary to the United Nations to actually feed people in conflict. Now, that said, I would like to talk to you about the role of Filipinos, even without the United Nations at that time, in the saving of 1,300 Jewish people during the Holocaust, or what we call the Shoah, under the time of President Manuel Quezon. So can we play the Quezon thingy? This will be repeated 2 years or 3 years, 4 years after our independence in 1946. When, again, we were still a young country under the United Nations, and then the United Nations asked us, we need a place to bring 5,500 people. 5,500 people. And this is the story of the White Russian refugees and how we saved them from communism. Okay, sige. Ano nga ba ito? Turo ko sa'yo.
Makasaysayang araw po, it's Xiao time! Sa kasaysayan natin, may mga mahalagang hiyas na matagal na naitago at hindi natin nabigyan ng halaga. Ngunit, kung ating tutuklasin, magniningning ito bilang inspirasyon sa ating lahat. Si Elpidio Quirino ay parang isang diamante pinatibay ng apoy, ngunit nagniningning bilang isang pangulo na isinabuhay ang diwa ng Pasko. Pagpapatawad sa mga nagkasala sa iyo at pagkalinga sa mga nangangailangan. Hindi lamang talino, may puso. Bagay nga sa kanyang initials niya, may EQ siya. Isang pinakitaan niya ng pagmamalasakit ay ang mga White Russians. Ang mga White Russians ay ang kolektibong tawag sa mga residente ng Rusya mula sa iba't ibang lahi na taga-suporta ng Tsar at mga anti-komunista. Nanganib ang kanilang buhay sa mga Red Russians at tumakas nung panahon ng Bolshevik Revolution noong 1917 patungo sa China. Ngunit, muling nanganib ang buhay nila dahil sa napipintong pagwawagi ng mga komunista sa China noong 1948. Kinailangan nilang iwan ang lahat at sumakay sa mga bangka na inorganisa ni Colonel Gregory Bologov. Subalit, sa kabila ng panawagan ng International Refugee Organization na tanggapin sila, walang bansa sa daigdig ang tumugon. Hindi ito nakapagtataka, kakatapos pa lamang ng digmaan at ang mga bansa ay problematiko pa rin sa kani-kanilang mga suliranin. Gayun din, 6,000 katao sila. Napakarami. Sa kabila nito, si Quirino lamang ang tanging pinuno sa mundo na dagling kumupkop sa kanila at pinatira sila sa Tubabaw Island, Giwan, Eastern Samar. Ang kanilang kamanghamanghang kwento ay mapapanood sa isang bagong dokumentaryo ni Malcolm Velasco, ang Tubabaw Odyssey, Refuge in the Philippines, batay sa Tiempo Russo Memory Project ni Kina May Kwan. Naabutan ng mga Ruso ang malaparaisong dalampasigan at isla ng Tubabaw, ngunit ang tangi lamang naroon ay isang lumang temporaryong ospital na ginamit ng mga Amerikano noong World War II. Kailangan nilang itayo ang isang pamayanan para sa libu-libo nilang mga kababayan mula sa mga matataas na damo. Sa unang pagkakataon, nakaranas rin sila ng mga malalakas na bagyo na winasak ang kanilang mga tents. Ngunit, naibangon din nila ang kanilang sarili. Binisita sila ni Pangulong Quirino at ipinagiba niya ang mga pader upang ipadama sa mga ito na malaya sila sa bayang ito. Doon sa Giwan, nakapamuhay sila doon ng mapayapa at malaya. Naisabuhay nila ang kanilang mga pananampalataya, lalo na ang mga Greek Orthodox, sa pangunguna ng kanilang obispo na naging santo sa kanilang relihiyon na si Saint John. Ilan sa mga tumira doon ay nakilala ko nang ilan sa mga White Russians ay bumalik sa Pilipinas para sa ika-125 karawan ni Quirino noong Nobyembre, kabilang na si Natalie Sabelnik at ang premyadong musikero na si Nikolai Masenkov. Pagdating ng panahon, ang mga White Russians ay tatanggapin na sa iba't ibang bansa tulad ng Amerika at Australia. Subalit, 3 taon din silang nagkaroon ng mapayapang Pasko na protektado ng ating bansa. At dahil dito, nagdanas pa sila ng mas marami pang maliligayang Pasko sa piling ng kanilang mga pamilya. Si Quirino ang siyang naging instrumento para makita ng mundo ang diwa ng Kapaskuhan na nasa puso ng bawat Pilipino. Ano man ang paniniwala nito. Maginhawang Pasko po. Ako po si Xiao Chua para sa Telebisyon ng Bayan. And that was Xiao Time.
Yeah. So, the last question, so that's the role of the Philippines in the United Nations. We actually have a very big history in the United Nations. Hindi ko na lang sinama dyan, we fought under the United Nations flag in the Korean War. And we drove away the North Koreans. It was one of our best record as an armed forces during the Korean War. But I will not have time to talk about that. So, my time is up, but the last question would be, what is the use of the United Nations if it cannot stop the wars? So, for example, in 1994 or 1995, if I'm not mistaken, in Rwanda, there was a Tutsi, there was a Hutu government that killed the other ethnic group, the Tutsis. That was a massacre. Not a massacre. It was a genocide. When you talk about genocide, it was the killing of hundreds of thousands of people. Genocide yan. Rwanda. There's a film about that called Hotel Rwanda. You know, kawawa doon kasi sa Hotel Rwanda pinagmukhang kawawa yung general of the United Nations peacekeeping, si General Romeo Dallaire. That guy was a great guy. He was a patriot. But the problem was he cannot do anything when the Hutus were killing the Tutsis Because the United Nations peacekeeping force, they have no weapons. They're just there, but they have no weapons, so they cannot prevent people from killing each other. And it needs an intervention from another country, which the United States and the other big powers they neglected. Because they were Africans, they were not important. Yan ang sinasabi nun eh. So, if that is the case, if the United Nations have no police powers, then what is the use of the United Nations? Well, my argument is this. It is still useful. Because the mere fact that we haven't had any world war in the past 78 years is already a testament of one thing. And what is this? The power of diplomacy. It's better that there is a platform where people are talking rather than they are not. You get me?
Yes.
So, there are wars here and there that we cannot prevent, but it doesn't escalate to a global war. And aside from that, the United Nations doesn't only prevent wars, world wars from happening. They also preserve cultures through the UNESCO. They also preserve health through the World Health Organization. Remember that during the pandemic, it was the World Health Organization who made it possible why the swift identification of the disease from China. And then from China, the Chinese were urged to put out the information up very quickly after they found out that this is the coronavirus 19. And then the ano tawag nila doon? There was yung genome sequence of the virus was passed to other countries so that we can develop a vaccine. And usually the vaccines are developed in 5 years, 10 years. But we are able to develop vaccine in a year after the pandemic. No? So, even because of that, we are now face to face. So, the United Nations helped in that. Yung United Nations General Assembly, I was wrong because I said that it was a branch of the United Nations. It was not a branch. It is a meeting. No? So, Carlos Romulo was the president of a meeting of the United Nations where the world leaders will speak and give their ideas to the world. You know, the last UN General Assembly that I watched was Duterte. He did not appear in New York because it was the coronavirus pandemic. He appeared via video. And Duterte, I don't like him, okay? I don't totally like him. But Duterte urged the nations of the world to not forget the smaller countries. Because in the vaccine distribution, they know that they're going to prioritize the rich countries. So they said, do not forget about us, the Filipinos. That was his plea to the United Nations General Assembly. So, yeah, there you go. Again, the main point is, the United Nations is still important because remember that when you negotiate, and this also applies in life, it should not be a zero-sum game. When we talk about things, when we negotiate, we always think that I should win and the other should lose. The United Nations way of doing it is we should have a win-win solution. It's not a zero-sum game when the loser is a total loser. You have to, when you negotiate, and this also should apply in the war in Israel versus Hamas, that there should be that both parties should benefit from whatever it is that you're going to talk about. So that also applies in life. You don't have to always win. When you negotiate, you can be both winners. Okay? And that's the power of diplomacy. Thank you very much. And good morning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Xiao Chua, for giving us, a very valuable knowledge on how the Philippines joined the United Nations. And you know what? One thing I've learned from today's talk is that there's only one version of history, and that is the truth. The truth that we should live righteous, we should treat people with respect, and help people, those who are in need. And now the floor is now open for an open forum. And I encourage everyone, every Chung Seans, to raise your hand in a dialogue with our guest speakers. Kindly raise your hand.
When they will all raise their hand, we will not finish.
Like maybe
Some of you.
Some of you, like 2 or 3 students will do.
Or someone wants to raise his hand.
Anyone? We have
Yeah.
Yep, kindly raise your hand, Harry. Kindly state your name and with your grade level.
Hello, I'm Margarita Chua Gutierrez and I'm grade 6 and I would like to say something that about the Philippines. What I just want to say is, on YouTube I'd say to look through any country video, but when you look through every single country video, there's barely anything about the Philippines. Like eating every country food, no Philippine food.
Yeah, that's true.
That's an example.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, are you saying what should be done? Okay, this is the problem with the Philippines. Remember, we used to be belittled because we were colonized by the Spaniards. So we were treated as a small country. As I said, we're a medium-sized economy, but we're treated as a small country. Unimportant. We are only important when the colonizers need us. You get me? So, when the Americans colonized us, and even after we gained independence, when we gained independence, the Americans are important. They made us feel important because the bases of the Philippines are still, the bases of the United States were still here. In fact, they were important again to the Americans because of what's happening in what we call the, what's that line? The first island chain. No? You read about this, the first island chain, because this matters to all of you because it's about China and Japan and the Philippines, no, and Taiwan and all of that. The bases are again here, although the Americans are renting, no, not owning the bases. But that is what happened to us. We were relegated as an unimportant country. So the only time actually that the world saw us as important was in 1986, during the time of the People Power Revolution, because we became the template of a peaceful regime change, which was copied by other countries in the world. So at that time, the Filipinos can go to the streets of New York, and when they are seen by people are like, happy to see Filipinos. But the problem is, in the 1980s and the 1990s, that was the resurgence of, shall we say, liberal politics, which means more inclusive, we respect all people, because it's about respect. We respect all people. Now, people are disrespecting people again because of social media and because of, the politics of extremism. This is what I want to talk about also. In social media today, people are racist to the core and they are belittling other countries. So, when we talk about the Philippines, people will not talk about the Philippines because there is Asian hate in America now. And it's good that actually it's not everyone dislike us or what. It's just that in general, people do not see us as important when they see themselves only as the important people. It's like in Pocahontas, you think the only people who are the people who look and think like you. So this is important now to learn that we should not, because if you want the world to be non-racist, you should begin in yourself. You see? So, again, we the Filipino Chinese, we also experience racism in this country, especially because we have a war with, not a war, we have a conflict with the government of the People's Republic. Diba? I also get hate because I am Filipino Chinese, even if I don't know how to speak Chinese. I only know how to say Wang Tuai La, which is not even Chinese. Okay? Wang Tuai La. It's not even Chinese. It's not even, you know, it's not even that. It's buchiki. Okay, so that is the problem. Because we don't respect cultures as much as we did a few years ago. And I think, don't lose hope. Because I think this is seasonal. When we do stupid things now and we are going to fall from it, we're going to learn from it and we will do non-stupid things again. And while we're doing non-stupid things, we feel we want to do stupid things again and we will do stupid things again. It's like that. It's a cycle. You know, remember that before we allowed martial law to happen and now people are asking for martial law again, which is stupid. But what can you do? Right? Because they felt that freedom, human rights is not important because they live in a time of human rights. Don't allow this to happen. That you only love freedom and human rights because you were deprived of it. You should always learn from history, from those who experienced the lack of freedom and human rights. So that you are not going, and the lack of respect to other people, which leads to more conflict when you are extremist, meaning you have extreme beliefs about what you believe, that you want to impose them on other people. Okay? So just the key word here is respect. Okay? So the one who you get from me, your free Kwentong Quirino comics. Okay? Later, we will have a picture. Okay, next question, next to us.
Chung Se, some kindly raise your hand if you have a question. We have from Reed.
Hello, I'm Leo and I'm from grade 7.
Hi.
Why did Hitler kill many Jews?
Okay. That's the question? Okay. So, this is a... Well, I will make the story simple because it's a complicated story. Remember that the Jewish people lived in Canaan, in what is now called Israel. Okay. But actually, they also just went there and occupied it. If you look at the Bible, they also killed the residents there, no? The Canaanites, they killed. So, it's in the Bible. So they lived there for many years. They actually can come and go because they were also became slaves of the Babylonians. So they went to Babylon and they returned again. See? But eventually, the Romans occupied them, so they always get occupied and they always get rebellion. And so when they have rebellion, you know, Jesus Christ was killed because of fake news, right? That he was the leader of the rebellion. So the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, basically. No? The Romans destroyed Jerusalem, and that means that the Jewish people have to go somewhere else. So they scattered around Europe after the death of Jesus. Okay, so they scattered around Europe. Quite a complicated story here. Okay, so what happened? Those who have left there, eventually, the Arabs populated Israel, which is now the Palestinians, what we call the Palestinians. Okay, so what happened? So they went to Europe, but in Europe, they were merchants. You know, they're like the Chinese who are, you know, negosyante. Negosyante din si La Jews sa Europe, and the people were saying, why are these people are becoming rich, and we, the Germans, for example, are becoming poor, or we, the Russians, are becoming poor. So what happened was, they systematically eliminated, even before Hitler, some of the Jewish population through the pogroms. And at that time, it was legal to kill those Jews in their country. Imagine, no human rights, totally. So, there were some people who were saying, the problem of the European Jews should be answered by having a Jewish state in Palestine. So we will return there. And that is what you call Zionism. Okay. Now, while that was being talked about, again, it's a complicated story because the British promised the Zionists that if they get the country after World War I, we're going to give you your state. And they also promised the Arabs that we will give you your own state as well. So, I don't know. Now, because they wanted support for the war. Now, that said, Hitler, during the defeat of Germany in World War I, blamed the defeat to the Jews. Because the Jews of Germany were successful people. They were the ones holding banks. They were the ones holding professions like being a doctor and all of that. And he wrote a book while he was in prison. Because remember that he also rebelled against the state. But he wrote a book in prison called Mein Kampf, My Struggle, in which he blamed the Jews for everything that happened during World War I. The defeat of Germany and the inflation. You know, inflation, that if they have to buy bread, they have to, cart cash. That's how high the prices at that time in Germany. So, the problem was, the Germans, who are the most educated and most cultured among European nations, the land of Beethoven and Goethe, believed Adolf Hitler. And they felt bad they felt anger on the Jews taking over the country. Which is very similar to what happened in the 1960s against the Filipino-Chinese in the Philippines. When the Filipinos were saying, kayo mga Chino, bakit kayo nakukuha na aming mga trabaho? Bakit kayo nakukuha na aming mga negosyo? Oh. Ay, Chinese pala. Sorry, mali. So, baliktad. So, bakit kayo mga Chinese, di ba? Sabi nila, bakit kayo ang mayaman sa bansang ito? Because ito nga yung thinking. The Jews in Germany are already German Jews. But the problem is they do not integrate because they have their own religion. Diba? They don't. But they married, a lot of them married Germans already, but they have Jewish blood. Hitler don't want to have anything to do with them. So, the pagkaupo ni Hitler as Chancellor of Germany, pinlano na nila yung mga concentration camps na yan. Which eventually by 1935 pa lang, 1936, they were already harassing the Jews. And some of the Jews were already going to the Philippines. Kinukuha na ni Quezon. Mahabang time yun eh. Hindi siya isang buong 1,300 Jews, isang buong. Paunti-unti yun. From 1936 to 1938. Oh? And that is when, I think it was in 1938 or 39, when the Wannsee, ang tawag nila yung Wannsee Conference, where the German government, the top officials of German government, had a secret meeting in Wannsee, where they decided that the final solution to this problem is to kill all of them. So that is when they instituted the gas chamber, where because they need bullets at Juarez, so they needed a more cheaper solution to kill all these people, and it was the gas chamber that they were able to take out, which was terrible. Okay, so that's the reason why Hitler killed the Jews, and that also meant that because of the 6 million Jews that were killed, there is sympathy to the establishment of the Jewish state, in which the Philippines actually voted in the United Nations. And that is why, if you're a tourist in Israel, you are visa-free. Filipinos are visa-free. Except, of course, you do not want to go to Israel now. No? Okay, last question, last two. I'll try to be short so that we can accommodate the two ones that raise their hands. This one and the other one there. Yeah. So, saying last. Okay, so get your Kirino comics with me. The faculty also have their copy. If you will not get any copy, in my website, there's a PDF copy which you can download. Mga Kwentong Kirino is because you will see here the story of the White Russians. Sige. Yes.
Sir, I have a question. What is the difference between Chinese-Filipino and Chinese-Filipino? Because I know that Chinese-Filipino is a dialect of Filipino, but Firstly, it's an honor to talk to you, sir.
Thank you. It's a bigger honor to be with all of you.
My question is, my name is Justin Kevin Calipo, sir. And my question is, who is the real mastermind towards General Luna's death?
Okay. That's a totally unrelated question, but I will answer it. Okay. I will talk about it, and I will be brief because I want to answer other questions. Okay, quiet please. General Luna was killed by the men of Pedro Hanulino, which was part of the Kawit Brigade. Okay. The Kawit Brigade were the personal presidential guards of Emilio Aguinaldo. But apparently Emilio Aguinaldo said, I was not part of the plot to kill General Luna. My only fault was I did not act on the perpetrators. Okay, who ordered the men of General Luna? Now, what we can pinpoint was that a few days before that, there was a meeting wherein Trinidad H. Pardo de Tavera, Felipe Buencamino, and Pedro Paterno had a meeting where they plotted what will happen when they kill General Luna. This involved also General Gregorio del Pilar, because if General Luna will survive Cabanatuan, he's going to be attacked somewhere else. So they were already prepared that if General Luna survives, there will be another one who's going to kill him. The one of them is General Gregorio del Pilar. So, according to so they were killing already Antonio Luna, you know this already. There was an old lady who appeared in the window upstairs. And that old lady said, is she still moving? Nagalaw pa ba yan? Two eyewitnesses said that old lady said, nagalaw pa ba yan? And who is that lady? That's the mother of General Emilio Aguinaldo. She was part of the plan. Okay. I cannot say if General Aguinaldo was part of it, but he was, that all of them were his men. They were probably protecting him if he did not have anything to do with it. Why do I say that I still have a doubt if General Luna was killed by Aguinaldo, despite the fact that all of them were their men? Because in the previous instance, General Aguinaldo actually admitted that he ordered the shooting of Andres, or the killing of Andres Bonifacio. So if he thought that this was the right thing to do, why will he not admit it? Kasi kung inadmit niya yung kay Aguinaldo, ay kay Bonifacio, I know he would have admitted to Luna. But again, I do not know. So the circumstantial evidence point to, yes, he had something to do with it, but we cannot prove it. Okay. So there you go. I hope I answered your question. Next, last one. I know we don't have time. I'm sorry, you know. Even if I want to.
Hello, my name is Sam Justin D from grade 6.
Hi.
I would like to ask if the United Nations wanted peace, why is there still wars like Russia and Ukraine?
Ah.
It's his question.
Okay. Okay, I will answer it very simply. One, we live in a world that is not perfect. Number one. If all of us think the same way, there would have been no problem. But, you know, apparently, whoever created us, God, wanted us to have free will. Which means we have a decision, personal decision for our actions. What to do and what not to do. Okay. The United Nations is an institution run by human beings. The Catholic Church, even if it's holy, is not very holy, you know, you see. Because it is run by human beings. All of us are human beings, prone to mistakes. and misjudgments. And the problem was, the United Nations cannot stop wars because, number one, all countries, although people go enter treaties so that they will be part of an agreement to not do wars, and if there were wars, we should, you know, do some things to help the civilians. The problem is that we when you try to impose that on a sovereign country, that means interfering with their independence. Kasi higher than the United Nations is your right to decide for yourself. So remember that the ICC already want to arrest Duterte, charge Duterte for the human rights violation of the drug war. The United Nations cannot just get Duterte because it has to be allowed by our government. And the government will not allow it because magkakampi sila eh. So this is the problem. The problem of United Nations common good or sovereignty of a nation. Because they cannot just interfere. So we have to have our own free will to implement the United Nations wishes. So this is where the problem lies. Because Vladimir Putin wanted it another way. So it wasn't able to stop Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. Because Vladimir Putin had a version of history, that Ukraine belongs to Russia, and that there are Nazis in Ukraine, which is fake news, totally fake news. But people believe it. So I also want to stress here that it is important for peace to have proper information. Proper information is important. Because if you have the wrong version of history, and yes, we can have many views of history, but as it was said, the truth is based on evidence. So, if people will think, kasi ganito yan eh, if we all believe in fake news, and we will not believe the truth, and this is the lesson in Ukraine, Russia, in Israel, Hamas, people were thrown apart because they believe a version of history that is so radical, that only believes in themselves. History is the true things that happen somewhere in between. And when we agree on that somewhere in between, there will always be peace. Because we will always be talking. So, I think I'll leave you with that.
Once again, thank you so much, Mr. Xiao Chua,